Welcome to Better Fishing with Two Bald Biologists, a podcast from the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. We're your hosts, Corey Oakley and Ben Ricks, two bald guys who happen to be fish biologists and avid fishermen. We hope the information that you learn in this podcast will help you think like a fish and become better fishermen. Well, welcome back, folks, to another edition of Better Fishing with Two Bald Biologists. Ben, how's it going?
It's been going good.
Oh, that's good. You busy? Not busy?
I am busy.
Yeah.
Busy.
And currently the wind's blowing on the coast. I've noticed that.
It is windy.
It's been windy for a hot minute down there.
Yep. I told y'all we started kindergarten. We started swim lessons in my life. This is not about fishing at all, but it is my life.
It's where you live.
And so
yeah,
that's where we're at.
Kids are back in school.
Apparently.
My son is starting his senior year. That's a big deal, evidently. I don't know, but
senior year is kind of a thing.
Seems like everybody's kind of excited about it. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. It's the senior year, you know?
So, yeah. Well, I mean, we've started swimming lessons, and apparently fish need water, and so does my daughter. So
she all about it?
She's all about it. So
I remember those days.
It's a good time.
It's been a hot minute since that was the case. But we appreciate you listening. Just a reminder, we've talked about this. Maybe we'll talk about it a little more, but we're going to have some passes to fishing expos in 2026. So there'll be fishing expos kind of across the state. They kind of start, I guess the first one's in Raleigh right after the new year.
Right. Specifically, we will be at the Raleigh and Fayetteville shows.
Yeah.
We'll be at some other ones. But
yeah, the Raleigh and Fayetteville shows. Fayetteville will be, I think, late January, early February, somewhere in that range. I can't remember the exact dates right now, but we'll get those for you. But we're going to have passes to give away. And the way that you can kind of be entered into that is, just send us a picture of a fish and and to Two Bald Biologists at ncwildlife.gov. And we will enter you into a drawing, and we'll draw that out and we'll get it for you.
If you let me know which show you intend to go to, that might help too.
Yeah, that's helpful.
I'd hate to give you a free pass to something you're not going to.
Yeah.
And that would take an opportunity away from somebody else.
You're going to Fayetteville and you live in Wanchese, or something like that.
Might not work.
Anyway.
But we might be able to give you something else. We got some good swag. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, send us your pictures. We'd love to have them. Love to see what you're catching out there because I don't get to fish as much, and I like living through other people's moments at this point in time. That's why I call Ben. It's really not to learn about Ben. It's really what he's catching. So, anyway.
I get it.
The secret's out.
You don't want to learn about this. It's kind of a mess.
Well, today we're going to talk about all things largemouth bass. And joining us is Casey Jobert. Casey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Tell us all about yourself and who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Casey Jobert. I'm the District 6 fisheries biologist. Over in the middle of the state, the Piedmont, help manage Lake Norman, Mountain Island, Wiley, and the Yicampede chain from High Rock down to the South Carolina border.
You got some popular water.
Yes.
Popular bass water for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we appreciate you being here. We're excited. Everybody's always, for whatever reason, to talk about bass. It seems to be a popular topic. It's like somebody fishes for them. I don't know. There's like people buy boats, gear, all that.
I guess somebody likes them.
Somebody likes them.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
I just got back from a whole symposium in Texas talking nothing about bass for the better part of a week.
You mean all about bass? You said
nothing but bass.
Oh, nothing but bass. Okay, sorry. It was one of those moments.
We talked a lot about bass.
Yeah, I missed that for a lot of reasons, but I appreciate that you could go. Yeah, no. So we're going to talk about bass today, talk particularly about largemouth bass. That is the most popular fish that we have in our state. Casey, give us a bit of, I guess maybe, why do you think bass fishing is so popular in our state?
I think they're just such a charismatic fish that, so many people love catching. They have a large mouth, which is fun when you catch them. You can pick them up, take a big, picture with them, hold them up. I think they're also just across the entire state. I feel like if there's water, there's a largemouth bass in it. Whether or not they're good quality largemouth bass is, another subject. But they're all over the state. And they're fun. They put up a fight. So I think those are really the main reasons.
For me, I think it's because they are just hard enough to catch and just easy enough to catch. Like on the right day, you can catch one on a pencil cap or pen cap. And on the wrong day, you can't buy one with the most expensive bait you have. And so I think it's that ebb and flow of how challenging they are that's a big draw. But again, if you fish long enough, you'll hit, the day that they're biting, and you can be very successful. And I think that's part of the draw. Also, they're strong and they jump out of the water, and but also I think because what you said, they're everywhere, that they've got a good following. You can be a bass fisherman and live in Manio, and you can be a bass fisherman and live, where's that place we went that was, I think is still in Tennessee? Murphy. Yeah. We went out there and caught bass. And so there's no place in the state, unless you're in really cold water with trout,
high elevation,
that there is not largemouth bass for the most part. So
yeah, and obviously we made a little fun of it at the beginning. For those of you who don't know, it is a huge industry in the country. It goes back probably 50 years or so, but, bass fishing became really popular in the late 60s, early 70s as a sport fishing opportunity. Ray Scott and BASS made it kind of a household thing, particularly in the southern half of the United States. And now it's grown throughout the United States, Canada, Mexico. There's bass in Puerto Rico. There's bass in Japan.
Africa.
Yeah, they're everywhere. They've moved them everywhere, which is not a great thing. But anyway, that's a whole nother story another day.
Other places, largemouth bass are an invasive species.
That's exactly right.
So it's why you should not move fish.
Yep.
They're having a podcast talking about how bad largemouth bass are.
Yeah, and we're like, yeah, we love them. Yeah, it's very popular. When we do creel surveys, which is a survey where we interview anglers across the state, they're generally the number one species that people target in our state, that anglers target. They're usually 40 to somewhere close to 60% of our anglers fish for bass. And usually nobody's anywhere close. There's usually like in the 20s and 30% on the other species.
You also can fish for bass year round. There's not like a season, like a lot of us talk about a shad run and things like that, where it's a very seasonal fishery. But bass are here all the time, every day, and they're catchable when it's cold. They're catchable when it's hot. I mean,
it all changes, but they're catchable. Yeah. No, that's good. So there's been, obviously because it is so popular, Casey, there's been a lot of talk about different species of bass in our state. There's been a lot of talk about what is a largemouth in our state. So can you take us kind of through, we hear a lot of these terms of northern largemouth bass, Florida bass. What are those animals, and do we have them? We'll put it that way.
Yeah. So it feels like this information is changing on a monthly, yearly basis a little bit. But what the current standing is that there's Florida bass and largemouth bass.
So we've dropped the whole northern,
I believe at this point, although there's some controversy regarding that. But I think for today, we'll go with Florida and largemouth.
I will say, because I was in a room full of people from all over the country, we, the group of biologists, are not in concordance right now about how many.
We're not all in agreement?
No, imagine that. Scientists not agreeing with each other. But there's a lot of discussion about different species of bass, how many there are. Functionally, I like to simplify things a lot because it helps my brain. I'm not quite as smart as Casey, so I have to dumb things down a little bit.
I'm not smart as both of y'all, so there you go.
But functionally, there's some larger groups that we all know about, but those groups are getting split apart based on their basins and where they're located. And we'll get there eventually. But right now, we are not in agreement. But there are a lot of different black bass species being described. The Bertram's bass, which is native to North Carolina, was just finally officially described. We've been talking about it for years. It's a real thing now,
and
right?
It used to, it's a real thing. And it used to be lumped in the group that was called red eye bass. But back to largemouth. So we have Florida and we have largemouth. Is that where we are now?
Largemouth. Yeah. And
there's Florida bass and largemouth bass. Okay. Gotcha.
And if you hold them beside each other, they look like a green fish that are all the same. So you wouldn't necessarily just by catching one go, oh, this is a Florida bass.
Yeah. And if you're in North Carolina, it's extremely rare to get one that's 100% of either of those.
Yeah. So explain that to us. I mean, what does that mean?
So essentially, we have a bunch of bass out there that are mutts, that are some percentage Florida genes.
That we would call largemouth as in
we would just call it a largemouth. But it has some percentage of Florida genes and some percentage of largemouth genes. And they're pretty much only 50-50, which we can talk about in a minute, but if we put them there. So a lot of the fish we have are, generations down the line, and now they're kind of this like 30-70, 60-40 of that mix of genes between those two species.
So they're basically just largemouth mutts or bass mutts.
Yeah. And generally over towards the coast, there's more Florida genes. Towards the Piedmont, it's like a mix. And
yeah, I was going to say that. I've been a biologist on the coast the whole time I've been in North Carolina. And our bass looked like probably before we started stocking willy-nilly all over the state as resource managers years ago, Florida bass were probably not necessarily Florida bass. They were probably some sort of eastern seaboard bass, that kind of was in North Carolina originally. We do still have a few somewhat isolated populations that are 80 or 98, 97% Florida bass, which probably means that's what they were all along, So if you're a coastal guy and you call me and you say, Ben, I want to make sure we stock Florida bass, I would say, we already got them. We're good to go. Everywhere else, they are kind of a mixture, it seems. So,
I mean, if you look at the maps of Florida bass, it's basically from the Florida Panhandle region, kind of north and east along southeastern Georgia, southeastern South Carolina, eastern North Carolina, and maybe that southeastern Virginia area is where they originally were. So if you can kind of think about that on a map. And then...
So Florida made them famous, but if we'd have got to them quick enough...
If we'd have made them famous, we could have called them Carolina bass. But, people in Florida, whatever. It's just how it went. But anyway, that's probably where they came from. And then largemouth bass were kind of throughout the country. Well, not throughout the country, but throughout that eastern half of the United States, particularly in the northern, probably half, mid to northern part of the country is kind of where they were. And then, as resource managers, bass were popular. Bass got moved around. And then all this genetic mixing happened because we moved them around. And so that's what's happened in North Carolina is we had mutts. We probably had mutts anyway because we seem to be kind of on that dividing line. We're kind of where the largemouth bass are coming from the north and the Floridas are coming from the south. So we probably had that anyway, but we really have that now.
I think there would have been natural mixing even if humans did not exist with stocking trucks.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's interesting because this is a huge debate amongst bass anglers. Florida's better in this situation. Northern, what we called northerns, but largemouth are better in this situation. If you didn't know, bass anglers are quite opinionated. Passionate and opinionated. I love all of you. I want to talk to every single one of you. So please call or write us. We'll be glad to have discussions. And the bass anglers that know me know that. Know I want to talk to them. I will bust the door down to talk to you. But, a lot of times we get anglers, well, I want Floridas here, I want northerns there, and that's not necessarily needed in that situation. If you know the background genetics, which we've done quite a bit of work on, right, Casey?
Yeah, we've done statewide genetic sampling to kind of get
and
that.
And we're still doing that, right?
Yeah, to kind of get that baseline of what is out there so that if we do start stocking fish, which we have done in certain places, we know what we're putting on top of those individuals.
Yeah, because, a lot of times we get that request from anglers, and it doesn't necessarily mean bass anglers. We get that request from other types of anglers too. We want you to stock this because we think it'll be beneficial. Years ago, we may have done that as an agency, just stocked fish to stock fish's sake, so to speak. But, now we try to make sure, one, we're doing no harm. Two, it would be beneficial. And a lot of times what we find is that in particular in the stocking bass world, stocking fish is really not that beneficial to bass. We've done a lot of bass stockings across the state. We've done a massive one in coastal plains after hurricanes, and we found don't waste the time and money in that.
I know that's going to be heartbreaking for some folks to hear because we have these hurricane-associated fish kills, and you think, well, there's no fish left. We got to stock. And what we learned was that was right, except for the fact that the few fish that eke it out are adapted. They've been here for thousands of years. They're adapted to live in coastal environments with low water quality to begin with. They
know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing, and they do it better than we can do it at a hatchery. And so even though it seems like a low abundance of fish, and because it is, The fish that are left,
Do well.
it's like going to a buffet at 11 o'clock. You get all the food, you know. And
No tray is empty.
I'm just saying, I know some things about that. So what we see is immediately after fish kill, and the best example I know is we stocked the Roanoke River after a fish kill that happened 8-9 years ago. We did not stock the noose. Right now, both rivers, one we stocked, one we didn't stock, they're both fantastic.
Yeah. And I mean,
Fish over 10 pounds in both
Exactly.
lakes right now, or both rivers right now. And so there's really not a measurable difference between those two places.
and we've done tagging studies back. You go back to the ice storm in 2003. I cannot remember that storm. I remember living through it. One of those ice storms that went through the Northeast.
Mhm.
We did this massive, this is before both of your times, we did this massive tagging effort for largemouth and stocking them out in the coastal plain, particularly in the Albemarle Sound region. And I think we might have recaptured, it was almost a million fish maybe of different various sizes. And we tagged every one of them. I can remember because it was cold and my hands were frozen and snot was running. It was a lovely time. But in that, of all those hundreds of thousands of fish, we might have recaptured like one or two. I mean, total, like not percent, like total fish that were ours. And yet the population recovered. And so I said all that to say, it's not that you don't do stocking. Stocking is a tool. It's just not always the tool. And particularly with bass, it really can be where it's not the tool.
And what we learned in the coast was if we go and we get, we do have we want our catch rates to be a certain level. But if we go and we don't get any bass, then we probably need to stop, obviously. But if we go and we get, while our catch rates aren't as good as we hoped, if there's still bass there, then stocking bass on top of adult bass doesn't always, those few fish that survive will spawn and do way more than what we could do at a hatchery. And that's the take home message is those, I said it before, this is a Jurassic Park thing. Nature finds a way, and bass have been doing it in most of our coastal environments for a while.
I get a lot of calls from small community parks, and they're like, we need to stock fish. Our anglers are only catching, tiny bass or brim. We go out, I'm like, well, let's do a survey. Let's see what's actually out there before we agree to stock anything. We go out and it's just chock full of bass. And I'm like, stocking more fish is not going to help the situation.
Right. Might need to thin the herd at that point.
Yeah.
Stocking is a tool, and it has to be applied in the right place.
Or not applied.
Yeah, or not applied in the right place. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. And I think it's important that we, as the managers, explain to our anglers, okay, this is what we're seeing, and this is why stocking would work or why it doesn't. Because I do think that there's a lot of folks that think, well, stocking will solve all my problems. And that's not always the case.
Yeah. So we just talked about stocking and about stocking maybe is a good idea or a bad idea, but we are stocking bass, are we not, in certain places? So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So focusing more on now the F1 largemouth bass stocking program that we
All right,
started.
we got to pause. We have to explain what F1
what an
is.
F1 is. Yeah. So an F1 is, all that means is first generation. First generation. That's really all it means. It's a first generation cross between a Florida, 100% pure Florida bass and 100% pure largemouth bass. And so what you hope from those F1 fish is that they get the best genes of both parents.
So they're getting 50-50,
Yeah, they're getting
basically,
50,
or close to
50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah, as close to that as possible. We are buying those fish currently to stock in North Carolina waters from a private hatchery. And the program started back in about 2020, working in collaboration with some local anglers. There was kind of this, these new tiger bass, these F1 bass that came out and got popular. And so the program actually started at Lake Norman specifically. Lake Norman is a beast of its own, which we can go into, but
That's a whole nother podcast.
yeah. Alabama bass were discovered officially back in 2001 in Lake Norman. Alabama bass are an invasive species. I know you've talked about it on the podcast before. They've kind of taken over Lake Norman. And so the stocking of these F1 largemouth bass out in Lake Norman was to hopefully provide, a little bit more of a fighting chance for the largemouth that were out there. The goal is not to take over the Alabama bass or try to get rid of them per se, but it's just to make the largemouth population that's out there better, hopefully. And so since 2020, since around then, 2021, the stocking has continued, and we're also stocking now in Jordan and Gaston as well. So to date, I crunched the numbers, we've stocked over 1.2 million fingerling F1 largemouth bass. So we're still kind of right in the middle of the project, but that's the quick.
1 million and we're not done yet. So if you're a bass angler and you think we should stock, you're probably really happy with us right now.
Yeah. But, the point of doing 3 different lakes is that there are 3 different basic trophic levels. There's, Norman, which is basically oligotrophic, which is a fancy title for mean low productivity. Means it's hard to grow fish there. If you fish Lake Norman,
very clear water.
Yeah, very clear water. If you fish Lake Norman, you know this, whether you want to admit it or not, Lake Norman anglers, I love all of you. You know I love you. It is hard to grow fish there. Those fish tend to be skinnier, tend to be lower in weight, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's Lake Norman. Then you go to some place like Lake Gaston, which we would classify as mesotrophic, which is middle trophic level, meaning that it's got some nutrients, but it's not high in nutrients, but it should grow fish better than Lake Norman. And then finally, Jordan Lake, which we've talked about multiple times on the podcast, is a fish factory. It is eutrophic. That's meaning high nutrient level. And so we're trying, it's basically an experiment.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, the whole thing is one giant experiment.
It's one giant experiment. We're trying it in 3 different locations. We have staff like Casey. She's obviously over at Lake Norman, but we have Kirk over in Kirk and David up at Lake Gaston doing the work. And then Seth and Danny are down in District 5 working on Jordan Lake. And Troy's with you in District 6.
And Kelsey's keeping us all in check.
And Kelsey's keeping us all in check. And basically, we're studying it every year. We're going out, we're checking, we're going to tournaments.
Yeah. So, we put the fish out in about June timeframe. They're only like 1 to 2 inches in length, small little fingerlings, we call them. We're doing that stocking in June. And then, of course, we hope those fish get bigger. So we've been stocking now at Norman. We have 4 or 5-year-old fish out there. So because we're at that point, we are starting to do tournament sampling. Before that, we also do our electrofishing surveys. So we have sites out there. We sample using the electrofishing boat, shock the largemouth bass, and every single one that comes up, we take a genetic sample from. We send those off and we see if they come back as F1s. Because as we mentioned before, you catch a largemouth out of Lake Norman, none of us, some people can believe they can, which is fine. We cannot tell if they are an F1 or if they are a bass that was, born in Lake Norman. And so we do our electrofishing surveys, we do genetics. And this year at Lake Norman, we started sampling at tournaments. So that was a really awesome opportunity. We were able to go out to an MLF tournament, the Big Bass Bash, and a professional fishing league tournament and collect samples. So we got over 300 fish from those tournaments sampled. And we also pit tagged those fish, which is really cool. So we were able to actually recapture a fish at the professional fishing league tournament. They weighed them in down at Blythe. And that fish was pit tagged up at the Big Bass Bash up at Pinnacle. So that was kind of cool just to see that we are recapturing some of them. And so we'll continue doing that because we want to see, we're stocking these F1 bass. Are they coming back for, any angler, for tournament anglers? Are we seeing that they're growing quicker? Also, are they just surviving? We put them out as pretty small fish. So yeah, so that work is continuing because Norman's a little bit ahead in the timeline. We've started with the tournaments. It'll be a couple of years before we start the tournament sampling at Jordan and Gaston.
Yeah, I think the take home is talking about this F1 project for everybody is one, we have a web page that's dedicated to that we update from time to time. So you can go to ncwildlife.gov and look up F1 largemouth bass project, and Casey's image will come up of her stocking, unless the image has changed, of stocking F1s. We have biologists, as she mentioned, that are constantly, figuring out if it's working, if it's not working. We pretty much set in our mind that this was about a 10-year period of time, that we were going to study it over 10 years. One, this is not a cheap endeavor, so I'll say that. And we would have to convert things in our own hatcheries to make this happen, which would cost money as well. And if it works, it's a tool that we can utilize in other places or maybe at the places that we already are. This wouldn't be a statewide type of thing. This would be somewhere where we're trying to supplement an issue or we think it'd be a really great idea. And so we'll just see. We'll see if this tool works. The jury's out. They're trying it in other states as well in different ways. I would say in some states they're doing it a little better than others. It just depends. But for us, because it's a tool, we really need to evaluate. We try to evaluate everything that we stock because we want to make sure that we're utilizing the resources of the state appropriately and make sure that we're not wasting money and wasting biologists' time and giving a false sense of hope to the anglers. Like a lot of times I think people think, okay, that's stocked fish. I mean, we get this, we literally stocked fish in 2020. And by fall of 2020, we had people saying that 3-pound fish were F1s, because it gives them that kind of false sense of hope. And that's not accurate because dumb things went in at an inch or two. They don't grow that fast, folks. I mean, they might grow fast, but they don't grow to 3 pounds in the first 6 months. And so I would tell you, if you're interested, talk to people like Casey, get educated, visit our website, learn what the project's actually all about, because there's a lot of false information that swirls on the social medias and all that when it comes to this project or it comes to bass in general. And it's not that anglers don't know. That's not my point. My point is talk to the people that are actually doing the work. They got no reason to tell you anything but what they know. And they'll give you all the information that we have thus far. And we're still learning. So we don't know yet.
There's a lot of, if you look up bass fishing right now, F1s are
hot. It's a hot
It's
topic.
a big trend, and there has been some states that have had a few projects that have kind of maybe had some limited success. And the theory behind it is because they are a hybrid, that maybe you get slightly better growth rates.
Hybrid vigor.
Hybrid vigor is the
terminology,
fish nerd term for it. But really, some of the benefits have been short-lived. Some of them haven't been able to be recreated. And so the thing that I like about this project is by the time we're done with it, we will be able to say, this is an idea that works, or this is an idea that did not work. And so I think from that standpoint, not only North Carolina, but really there's lessons to be learned across the entire Southeast with this project that I think will be helpful, because there's a lot of faith and hope that F1s are going to be the next, monster bass. And maybe that's true, but they're built off the same bass we already have. So we still have to make sure that if it is a strategy, that it's a strategy that can work for us, because it's really hard to maintain a pure Florida strain of fish, and it's really hard to maintain a pure northern strain. Then you have to harvest them, you have to put them together. So hatchery logistics are intense with this. And so it has to work for it to be worth our while. And I think the anglers have asked for it. And so we've done it. We're doing it, but we're doing it in a way that should be testable, hopefully repeatable in the future. And so I think that's the big benefit of what we're doing compared to some of the other studies, is I think at the end of this, we will be able to say F1 stockings, thumbs up, thumbs down, and we'll see. So
yeah. And just to remind people, because I think that this message gets lost a little bit, they are that 50-50. So they go out there, they make more babies, but they're not making more F1s. An F1 cannot spawn and make more F1s.
There'll be F2s at that point.
They will be F2s and then F3s, F4s.
And you lose that hybrid vigor.
And then they suddenly become mutts again. So just a reminder to people, because it kills me when somebody is, like, oh, I'm so glad you're stocking these. My grandkids are going to catch these fish in 30 years. I'm like, no, they're not. And so to continue the program, we have to continue stocking fish. And so, that's where we want to use the funds we have in the best way that we can. And so if we find out that this project works, then that's great. But if it doesn't, it doesn't.
So when I'm talking to groups and talking to people and talking to the public, I attribute it is the exact same as our hybrid striped bass program in reservoirs. If we don't stock hybrid striped bass, they don't exist.
They go bye-bye.
And the same thing, it's not that you won't go out to a lake and catch a largemouth, but if we don't stock F1s, they won't exist. As soon as their lifespan is over, they're gone out of the population. They don't exist anymore. Even though largemouth will still be there and their progeny, their babies will still be there, but their babies will not be, as she mentioned, their babies will not be F1s, and they will lose that hybrid vigor. So it's the same as us stocking fingerling, hybrid striped bass in a reservoir. It's the same thing. It is a tool. The reason we have pursued it in the Wildlife Commission is, this is a bit of a soapbox moment, and I apologize for that, but forever and a day, bass management in North Carolina has been, I'm going to say the word is difficult, because we don't have a lot of tools when it comes to changing a bass population. If you look at graphs of data or charts of data for largemouth bass populations across the state, they're basically the same over 30 years. They're very stable. It's a very stable population. It takes something major like a largemouth bass virus or Alabama bass or something like that to change what's happening. And so anglers for a long time are like, I want you to do this or I want you to do that, to a bass population. It's like, that's not going to work. And they're like, well, you're not doing anything for us. And that's not true either. But we've already talked about bass are everywhere. Bass reproduce on their own. There's generally quite a bit of habitat for bass. Bass can kind of get in just about any kind of habitat. I mean, for the most part, there's some things, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But in general, there's not a lot of manipulation from a fisheries biologist perspective that we've had in the past that could change bass populations. This is a tool that potentially can change bass populations. That's why we're pursuing it. That's also why we're pursuing doing tons of habitat work, the aquatic vegetation work that we're doing now, and building a greenhouse that's going to house these plants, growing out plants to put all throughout the whole state for habitat. Those are kind of the two tools, really. That and manipulating your behavior, an angler's behavior, which is very difficult with bass anglers. You cannot manipulate their behavior. Their behavior is pretty much set in stone. And I love all of you. Once again, this is not I feel like I'm preaching a little bit, but I'm trying to give you a history of bass management in North Carolina. We do a lot of surveys on bass. We probably survey bass more than we survey any other species in the state, because we want to make sure that those populations are doing well, are being successful, because we know that anglers are targeting those animals. And your fishing goes up and down. We'll talk about that in a minute, but your fishing goes up and down. But those populations, for the most part, unless something catastrophic, like I said, like largemouth bass virus or Alabama bass get involved, those populations pretty doggone stable, even though your success might go up and down. And that's when you, the angler, are like, you need to do something. And I'm like, it's not necessarily on our end. That's not to say that you don't see things, because you do. But this is one of a few tools that is a potential tool that we can use in bass populations. And that's why we're pursuing it, because it could be something great or it can be dead in the water. It just depends on what we find out.
Yeah. To me, I mean, like you said, it's hard to manipulate a bass population. You can change a length limit. It might take 10 years to find out that it didn't work. And also, the predominant culture is not a whole lot of harvest anyway. So changing length limits likely wouldn't benefit. Most of the time, the things that produce big bass are system specific, and they're generally related to forage base and or growing season. We clearly can't change our growing season, even though it is starting to get a little warmer in our winters.
And speaking of that, now I'm cutting you off and I apologize for that. But speaking of that, everybody thinks we should grow bass like Texas and Florida. We cannot. Please stop asking us to, because we cannot, because we don't have that growing season.
Right. Neither can South Carolina, neither can Virginia. So
yeah, we're stuck in the United States and in the latitude that we are stuck at. And there's not one thing we can do about that, folks. I apologize. Texas's growing season is probably 10 to 12 months, and ours is more like 8, maybe 9.
I mean, that being said, we've got reservoirs like Falls, like Jordan, that have tremendous forage bases in them, and they produce big fish. But it would be hard to push that envelope any harder
than it already is
without changing our latitude, so to speak.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't mean that in an ugly way. And at the end of the day, we, right now, as the state stands right now, short of the Alabama bass situation that we have, where largemouth are found, we have some really great populations. If you notice, the major tournament groups are coming to North Carolina because when they actually do show up, because they were not in North Carolina for about 20 years, when they actually do show up, the fish show out. And we have had some absolutely phenomenal tournaments. And yeah, bass fishing in North Carolina is actually pretty doggone good right now.
Yes, it is. We are in a period of fairly stable. Growth rates have been good, but in the coast, We are winning.
Yeah, we're winning right now, but we're one hurricane away from resetting the clock.
Knock on
That is
the-
true. But yeah, hopefully we don't have a hurricane. But to be honest, even if we don't have a hurricane, eventually our coastal populations are going to start, they're going to start crowding up. The growth rates are going to start to go down. In fact, the hurricane that we had is probably why things are so good now. I mean, I'm not wishing for a hurricane for obvious reasons, but there is some good that came out of it. And right now we're riding a pretty strong bass wave as a result. So
the hurricanes can definitely reset your population in a way.
Anyway, well, I think we talked enough about F1s. I just want people to know about the program. I want them to understand it. I want them to be educated about it. There's a lot of things out there that's been said that's not very accurate about the program. So if you're wanting to know more, like I said, visit our website, talk to people like Casey or Kelsey or Kirk or Seth. I mean, just call them up and say, hey, tell me about this F1 program. Walk me through it. Help me figure out what's going on so that I can be educated about it. Because I think that's the best thing you can be, and have very realistic expectations of what will come out of it. And we're going to tell you, we are going to tell you, this is what we found. And this works here, or it doesn't work anywhere, or it works everywhere. And I think that's really why we're doing this project. So
yeah, it's very easy to find our contact information. I checked last night, ncwildlife.gov. Go in the search bar. All you have to type in is F1. And it's the very first link that comes up. You scroll down just a tiny bit, and all of our contact information is there. And so we're happy to share any and all information about the project. Again, we're kind of halfway through. We have some preliminary results. Some things look, I will say, slightly promising, but also, again, it's still so preliminary that the numbers of fish we're getting back is still pretty low. But we will be out electrofishing, this coming spring. We'll be sampling at more tournaments. So look for us out there. We can't go to every tournament, but, we hope to be out at quite a few. For Norman, we're up to about 1,000 genetic samples we've submitted. And that number is just going to grow throughout the next few years.
Yeah, and I would say if you're a tournament organizer and you're interested in having one of our biologists, it doesn't even have to be about F1s. If you're interested in our biologists coming out to your tournament, talking to the group, or just participating in it, or to get F1 samples if it's at Gaston, Jordan, or Norman, contact these folks. They're more than willing. If they can work it out in their schedule, they're all for it. They're all for coming out and having that conversation and meeting with you and talking about what's going on the lake, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We are trying to target tournaments that have a decent number of boats, just because we are only taking samples from largemouth. And so at some of the tournaments, like on Lake Norman that we've worked, anyone that's been out there, when you bring in a 5-bag limit, you maybe get a largemouth. So when you do the math, we have to kind of be able to get enough samples. But we're definitely appreciative to all the anglers that have already helped out.
So in the short time left that we have left, let's talk a little bit about just bass fishing in North Carolina, where we are, where we're going. What do you think the future looks like? How great it is, how not great it is? You're the fisherman in the group.
Well, I already told you, the coast is killing it right
Just
now.
tag along.
Bass populations at the coast are great. Just to tag off of one thing that Casey said earlier.
I jumped too soon. I'm sorry.
No, it's is related to this. Bass fishing is growing faster than anyone would believe. And I didn't think it could get any bigger,
Yeah. Social media has made it just explode.
And because of that, we are seeing one of Casey's bullet points was tournaments and increased pressure. As evidence, you tagged, I don't know how many fish.
Well, from the tournaments?
Right.
We sampled over 300, but just largemouth.
So you tagged 300
at 3 tournaments.
At 3 tournaments, and one of them showed up again in another tournament.
Yeah, in the same year. Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's one example. It's kind of a back of an envelope. It's anecdotal at best, I will say. But there's been other work that shows that tournament pressure in these heavily fished areas can be significant and can have significant ramifications on bass populations, even though they're catch and release tournaments. And so I think that's just the thing that we need to be aware of as fishermen. It's the thing we need to be aware of as resource managers, that there's a lot of people fishing out there. And even though it's catch and release, it's having an impact on populations.
If you were to ask me just cold, not even thinking about podcasts, like where are we with bass fishing in North Carolina? I would just take it more maybe at a bigger scale. Where are we at bass fishing in the country? There's a lot of things that have changed over the past literally 5 years in bass fishing. There's a lot of things that are very similar, but social media is one of them where everybody and their brother's got a social media page that's bass fishing, talks about bass fishing, shows you YouTube videos, whatever. And all those things are great. I'm not knocking those things, but it's made it more popular. In the state of North Carolina, we have an influx of humans moving to North Carolina. I've closed the gate, folks, at the border. I don't know why they keep coming, but they do.
It's for the bass.
It might be for the bass, but the landscape's changing and people on the water's changing. The amount of people on the water, whether they're fishing for bass or not fishing for bass, just the amount of people on the water is changing. That affects fish. That affects what fish do. And then, technology has advanced. Forward-facing sonars come upon the scene. If you've watched some of these tournaments online, you watch BASS or MLF or the National Bass Fishing League, NBFL, maybe. I can't remember. Anyway, if you watch those guys online, a lot of them are utilizing forward-facing sonar. A lot of people that aren't in those tournaments are utilizing forward-facing sonar, which is a device that literally you can see the fish take the bait as you're fishing. They're just more targetable. Doesn't mean the fish is going to bite it, but they're more targetable.
You can see the fish you're not catching now.
Yes, exactly. But yes, Ben and I know all about that. So,
I have seen fish I didn't catch on mine for sure.
why are they not biting? And so the landscape's changing, and that's added pressure. That changes fish behavior. It may or may not change the population. It can, but it definitely changes fish behavior. One of the biggest complaints we've gotten at, like, say, a Harris Lake, for example, fishing at Harris Lake has changed pretty significantly in the loss of hydrilla. So there was a loss in habitat, but then there's been a massive increase in people in the triangle living here. And there's wake boats out there and ski boats out there and fishing boats out there. And, and then when we look at the numbers of the population, they don't change all that much. Like, the population hasn't really changed, but
The fish population.
the bass population hasn't changed all that much. And so when we have these conversations with anglers, it's like, population's about the same as it was 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. Just your success has gone down, and that is something that's very real. And anglers, I'm one of them, and I will attest, anglers, I can be guilty of it too. And I'm a fish biologist, but anglers, when they don't have success, their go-to is there's something wrong with the population. And there's not necessarily something wrong with the biology in the population. It's something wrong with your success in catching. Something is interfering with that, and it's different than it used to be. And I think that's one of the big things us as anglers need to think about, particularly in the bass world. There's a lot of baits being thrown at bass in the Piedmont. Maybe not as much in the coastal plain, but there's going to be. We keep talking about it. The more we talk about it, the more popular it becomes. And people like BASS, MLF came first. BASS came the year after. BASS is coming next year.
They're coming right back.
They're coming right back because, a man sat on the Pasquotank River and caught 130, almost, right at 120 pounds of bass.
It was the largest margin of victory ever. And he caught his PB during the tournament.
Yeah.
If I caught my PB during a tournament, you wouldn't be able to talk to me. My head would get so big, the 5 hairs I have left would just sink right into my skull.
He was maybe a couple of ounces shy on the last day of catching 30 pounds of 5 fish, catching 30 pounds 4 days in a row.
It was impressive.
Yeah, he was a few pounds. And he literally fished in maybe a half a mile of the Pasquotank River the whole time.
Much. It was not
did not
much.
go far. And that's just one little spot in that whole massive area. That tells you how good bass is, particularly in the Northeast and in just the coastal plain in general right now.
But you're talking about an area that's in good shape, the population's strong, and the effort right now
Is a little lower.
is still relatively minimal compared to
A Lake Norman.
a Norman or a Falls or a Harris or something like
you
that.
go to Lake Norman. I've worked it many, many years. Casey has too. You go to Lake Norman, there's a bass tournament every day of some variety and some size. There's some that are scheduled weekly, like they're the same tournament. Like
Tuesday night.
the Tuesday
Tuesday.
day seniors and the Tuesday night tournament. I mean, there's 2 on Tuesday that are scheduled every Tuesday, not to mention all the weekend tournaments that happen. So I just say, to anglers, have a conversation with your biologist, talk about the population. If you see problems happening, we want to hear. It may not be the population. It may be some human activity is affecting what's going on with your success. And we're always willing to listen. We're always wanting to hear from you. It's how conversations start. It's how we learn. We learn things. We have learned things from anglers. There's no doubt about it. They see things before we do. And they're very, very helpful.
Yeah. And right now we're out on these F1 lakes annually sampling. But if you have concerns about any other lakes, for the most part, the ones that I sample are on a kind of a 3-year rotation. But if we get enough concerns from anglers, we can certainly bump that up and, do things more frequently. Yeah.
I would say that it's important to talk to your biologist. Don't wait till there's a problem. Like, start talking about bass fishing and what you're seeing now. Reach out to Corey and I. You can email us at twoballbiologist@ncwildlife.gov. We'll put you in touch with your local biologist. Might be Casey. It might be somebody else. They're all very talented and they're all very knowledgeable about what's going on. But they have a different perspective of you, and you may be able to shed light on things they're seeing, and they may be able to shed light on things that you're seeing. And so together, maybe we can get a full picture of what's going on.
That's right. And we're constantly learning. Things change. We're constantly learning. We like sharing information with you guys. Sometimes we do great at that. Sometimes we don't. But we do like spreading that information so that you're knowledgeable about what's going on. The last thing we want to have happen, and it happens all the time, it's just human nature, is that misinformation gets shared, because then we have to backtrack and figure out how to fix that, so to speak. But in general, I would tell you almost every one of our biologists, in fact, I would say all of them, want to talk with you, want to have those conversations, want to spend that time. So just get in contact with them.
Absolutely.
So shall we move on to questions? Is it about that time? Question time?
Oh, yeah. We're there. Wow.
Question time.
It's quick.
The last thing I'll say while you're looking up questions, we didn't talk about things like invasive fish, potential things that are facing bass populations. We've talked here on the podcast quite a bit about Alabama bass. They're still marching across the state, folks. Please stop moving fish. If you're moving them, please don't.
It is a blue light special.
It is a blue light special, and it is not going to be what you think it's going to be when it gets there. Generally, it ends up not doing what you had hoped and causes problems. So once again, talk to your biologist about that and why that's not beneficial. And yes, it is a blue light special, which I think came out in the month of September, maybe? Yeah, September. Just came out in September. So anyway, appreciate it.
All right. So before I get into questions, just want to remind you guys, please, if you think somebody would benefit from this knowledge, you shared this or any other podcast, like it, subscribe. You guys have been really good in terms of sending us questions, letting us know what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, where you're having problems with your fishing, and who you can talk to in your local area about fishing, getting information. And I would encourage you guys to keep doing that, because it's a great way for us to get to know you, for y'all to get to know us, and for us to help get information out that's specific to your needs. Our first guy, Mr. Richards, he is asked about, is there anywhere that he can eat bass or bluegill without the worry of consumption advisories? Casey, you want that one?
Sure. Yeah, so there are consumption advisories, which, to back it up a little bit, is just telling people how much fish they should eat. It's pretty much a basic way to describe that. The NC Department of Health and Human Services is actually the entity that creates our fish consumption advisories. Sometimes we'll help them collect fish from water bodies, and then they do the testing and figure out how much is safe to eat. So you can always go to their website. I always suggest people do that. They're listed by water body and by, what species there are that have consumption advisories. If there isn't a consumption advisory listed, it doesn't exist. So the state actually does have a statewide advisory on largemouth bass.
Yes. So there's nowhere.
And that's for mercury.
Yes.
That's for mercury.
Yes. Largemouth bass bioaccumulate mercury better than probably any other species in the state. And so there is a consumption advisory on those.
Bluegill does not have a statewide consumption advisory.
No, they do not.
But there could be a specific consumption advisory for your area. So that's why you should always check if you have that concern.
Yeah, you can always check the specific water body you're going to be on.
So that's easy enough. The next one, this is a good question because the best example I know of how people reach out, and we've got them in touch with our local biologist, and our local biologists have gone well out of their way to try to help this person. So Mr. Borton was in Strouds Creek near the Eno River.
Know it well.
Know it well. He saw some small schools of fish swimming around, and he didn't know what they were, but he was looking for resources as to where he could find out more. And so I put him in touch with Seth and Danny, his local biologists, and for no more information than Mr. Borton gave him, they went way out of their way to try to help him. So, I mean, I saw a school of fish. What is it? I mean, normally we need a few more details, but the guys really came out. They said, there's a North Carolina Fishes of ID book. There's NC Fishes. Danny, who has a pretty strong non-game background. He's a great sport fish guy now. Hopefully he's on our side.
There's no sides here. We're all fish biologists.
But sport fish are cool. Just saying. They're all cool, but sport fish are really cool. Danny came out and he said, well, it could be, a white shiner, a pine wood shiner, a spot tail shiner, a satin fin shiner. So these guys went way out of their way, to provide resources and say, okay, well, it was likely one of these, but without seeing it, you'll have to look up the picture and see if it matches up.
If he'd have said they're all swimming around with red heads, they'd have known what to tell them because pine woods, but the other ones are a little harder to tell. So, and that's during spawning season. So.
Yeah, that NC Fishes website is amazing. Even if you don't have a question right now about a fish ID, go to it. You can see some great pictures.
How beautiful they are, how colored up they get. Our fishes are, particularly, I will say, well, all over the whole state. I mean, there's a lot of fish that people never see because they don't catch them. We've got over 200 plus species of fish in our state. And just like the amazing colors and designs and all that are just really, really neat to see. So that's a great place to go look at them.
Well, to me, it was, this is what we're talking about is, I don't know everything. Y'all know this already. Corey doesn't know everything. We all know that already.
I know very little at this point.
But we put Mr. Borton in touch with his local biologist and they had a wealth of information. My answer would have been like, I don't know. Maybe it was some shad.
And you would have been,
and I would have been wrong.
Maybe
I
close.
still could have been right, but probably not.
Probably not,
But these guys really stepped up to the plate and gave them the best information, best theories they could. And so that's what we're trying to do is, send us your questions and we'll go out of our way to try to get you the best answer.
Take pictures if you can. Clear pictures, not the fuzzy ones.
In a former life, so we don't have to cast aspersions at our constituents, but in a former life, I had someone draw me a picture of a fish. Unless you are like
an artiste,
well-trained in drawing fish
specifically,
that may not be as helpful as you think. So that's all I'm going to say. But
that's awesome.
Every piece of information you get helps. It was more helpful than a blank piece of paper. Slightly. I didn't know it was a fish.
I have people now that will send me videos of the fish. And it works.
All of that's helpful. Yeah.
The next question, this is eventually going to be, I hope to do a whole podcast on this, but we have Mr. Willis. He's been taking his grandson fishing. He's had some success. He's even, started out with bait and then he graduated, even caught a 2-pound bass in the pond near their house. He asked several questions about kids fishing. I think I'm going to save them for when we do a podcast about it. But one of his questions was, is it too soon to do like an excursion trip, like take them to the coast to fish or take them to the mountains and trout fish? And
how old was the grandson?
Grandson is,
ask mama.
6 to 7.
Yeah, 6 to 7 years old.
What do you think?
Bring a lot of snacks.
Okay. I have a 5-year-old who has been in my boat since she couldn't even lift her head up because it was COVID and, we didn't have anything else to do. Snacks. One is no. There's never too soon. There's never anything the only thing that limits you is your knowledge of that child and whether or not you think you can do it. If you think you can do it, go do it.
Your patience.
Yeah, you have to be very patient.
This is the man who, as he just mentioned, has taken his daughter from the time she was still in a car seat, a carrier car, like the baby car seat. So I've seen him in a deer stand with his daughter in that car seat. So he is.
I have changed diapers in a deer stand. I've changed diapers in a turkey blind. I've changed diapers in a boat.
If there's anything he's passionate about, it's about, one, spending time with his daughter, but also making sure that she gets those opportunities. And he started her young, very, very young.
And some may even say that I started my daughter too young. And if that's your opinion, that's cool.
It's wrong.
For my daughter, she could do it. And so it worked out. Now, I will say that sometimes, and this is the risk you run if you go on an excursion trip, because especially the younger your kids are, if it's time to go,
it's time to go.
It is time to go. And so you have to be willing to abandon ship. Sometimes fishing for an hour is success.
I would say the excursion doesn't need to be like long distance.
Or in conjunction with other activities, like
or you make it in conjunction with
Tweetsie Railroad, whatever else, So, but yeah, you can do whatever. I mean, you have to know your child and know what they're willing to do and know kind of where their time frame is. I mean, it's not about fishing, but we sat in a deer stand one morning for about 20 minutes, and I said, "Is it time to go ride around on the four-wheeler?" And it was 25 minutes past time to ride around in a four-wheeler, So you have to kind of know, you have to temper your expectations. And the win is not, well, we went out and we caught a 10-pound bass. The win is that I took a child out and they had a good time. And I did whatever it took, including 17 Rice Krispie treats to make that happen, because fish and snacks have 0 calories, just so you know.
Yeah, they don't count on the boat.
Yep, they don't count.
Unless it's a banana moon pie, and then it counts because it's the wrong thing to have on the boat.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that.
But, I mean, you fish with your children, and they're very young.
Yeah, so I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old boy, and we are very fortunate that our neighbors have a pond. So
works out great.
I can put a pizza in the oven, walk down and fish with them, and come back and get it before it starts burning.
Pizza and fishing. That is winning at life.
Yeah.
Just add ice cream to it and you got a full day right there.
Yeah. But they enjoy it. Our almost 3-year-old caught his first fish before he turned 2 by himself. He hooked it, immediately dropped the entire fishing rod on the ground, freaked out. But then my husband was able to get him, pick it back up and reel it in himself. So he landed his first fish before he was 2. But if we were out on a boat, I don't think our 2-year-old, he's not going to have the patience to be out there for very long. So we haven't done too many excursions, but they're definitely in the future.
Yeah, you have to figure out what works. For me, I was running rain gear to cleats and tying them to the grab rail and making shade and having naps and all that stuff.
Oh, but, Jonah has flat out slept in the bottom of the boat while I kept fishing. And he was fine with that. Like, he was like, I'm going to lay down for a while and then get back up and you fish, know? So it just depends.
So we will do an entire podcast. We might even get my wife on it to do it.
Pro tip. This is not about kids. Naps right after lunch on a cool day in the sunshine in the boat are the best ever. Learned that from a friend of mine, and I'm a firm believer in it. It's some of the best sleep you'll ever get. I do it, and every time he and I fish, we take nap from like 1 to 1:30, 1 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm just telling you, he's on the front of the boat, I'm on the back of the boat, and we're out. You can ride by. We'll wave when we get up.
Yeah. It's a good time to get a clicker on your reel. That way, if a fish takes off,
I'm not even fishing at that point. I mean, when he suggested, I was like, I don't know if I'll do this. And next thing I know, I'm wake up, there's drool all over me. I'm completely like comatose. It was the best thing ever. Anyway, sorry.
All that to be said, because we got to wrap this up, is take somebody fishing, especially a kid.
That's right.
If you could do one thing to help conservation, it would be to take somebody fishing. Or
hunting. Get them outdoors.
Because they have to be exposed to it, to understand it, to love it, to at least appreciate that other people like it.
That's exactly right.
And so it may not be their thing. And if it's not, then you don't have to keep taking them fishing or hunting. But if it is, it's so rewarding. It's so much fun. You get to see that whole world through their eyes, which is really interesting because they latch on to things that you take totally for granted. And it's a lot of fun. So know your kid is the best way I know to say it. And then from that point, figure out what your limitations and opportunities are. So,
well, we appreciate Casey being here. Casey, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for all that you do for District 6 and the people that live there and fish there. We appreciate y'all listening to us and tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening to the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission's podcast, Better Fishing with Two Ball Biologists. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a positive review and share with your friends. If you have questions, you can email us at twoballbiologists@ncwildlife.gov, or for more information, visit ncwildlife.gov. Until next time, stay safe and take somebody fishing.